Was Muhammad bin Qasim a thief, a bandit, or a savior? And what was his gruesome end? To understand this tale, we must not only look at the year 712 CE, but also at the faint imprints of centuries before it. Long before the advent of Islam, when the light of the new religion had not yet spread across the deserts of Arabia, the waters of the Arabian Sea were a constant means of connection between them and the shores of India. These relationships were not built on iron and gunpowder, but on trade and mutual dependence. For centuries, Arab merchants would bring their ships and anchor them at the ports of India's western coasts, particularly in Kerala, Gujarat and Sindh. They brought dates and Arabian horses with them and returned with spices, precious woods, fine textiles and the famous swords of India, which they then took to the markets of the Middle East and from there to Europe. This was not merely trade, but also a cultural exchange. Many Arab traders even settled permanently in the coastal areas of Sindh and Malabar, establishing their small communities and maintaining pleasant relations with the local population. It was an era of peaceful transaction. But then, in the 7th century, history took a new turn. In Arabia, Islam emerged as a unified political and military force, and after the Rashidun Caliphate, the Umayyad Caliphate was established. This was an era when the borders of the Muslim Empire were expanding rapidly. The thousands of years old Sasanian Empire of Persia had been brought to its knees. Syria and Egypt had been wrested from the Byzantine Empire, and Muslim armies conquering North Africa had reached as far as Spain. This was the peak of Umayyad expansionism, and it was against this backdrop that their sights turned eastward, towards the wealth of India and its strategic location, namely Sindh.
Then the incident occurred that is presented as the immediate cause for the invasion. It is the story of the sea pilots, which is very famous in history books. According to tradition, the families of some Arab traders who had died in Sarandip, present-day Sri Lanka, including widows and orphan children, were returning to Iraq on ships with some gifts for the Umayyad Caliph, Walid ibn Abdul Malik. When their ships reached near the famous port of Dibal in Sindh, they were attacked by sea pilots of the Med tribe, who looted the ships and imprisoned all the passengers, including women and children.
When this news spread like fire to Iraq, the powerful and hardline governor there, Hajjaj bin Yusuf al-Thaqafi, became enraged with anger. Hajjaj bin Yusuf was the pillar of the Umayyad Caliphate, who had crushed countless rebellions to strengthen the rule of Abdul Malik and then Walid. He had a reputation as an extremely cruel and ruthless administrator. He immediately wrote a letter to the ruler of Sindh, Raja Dahir, demanding the immediate release of the prisoners and that the pirates be brought to justice. According to historical traditions, Raja Dahir's response was disappointing.
He offered an excuse, stating that these sea pirates were very powerful and beyond his jurisdiction, and therefore he could not take any action against them. For Hajjaj, this answer was unacceptable. He considered it an insult to himself and the entire Umayyad Caliphate and found the justification and pretext for a full-scale invasion of Sindh. But was the real reason just this act of piracy? Was such a large and expensive military campaign prepared for the release of a few prisoners? Looking deeper, this incident was merely the first gust of the storm. The real reasons were far deeper and more complex.
The biggest reason was the expansionist policy of the Umayyad Caliphate itself, which we have mentioned. They wanted to expand their empire in every direction, and Sindh, due to its geographical and economic importance, was extremely attractive to them. The ports of Sindh, such as Debel, were like a lifeline with trade with the East. Controlling them meant complete security for trade routes and immense economic benefits. Secondly, by conquering Sindh, they would get a strong base camp for further advances into India. In addition, tales of the wealth of cities like Sindh, and especially Multan, were famous in the Arab world. The stories of treasures of gold and silver stored in temples were certainly a major incentive for the invaders.
Hajjaj bin Yusuf also had his own personal and political objectives. He was an extremely close and influential associate of Caliph Walid ibn Abdul Malik. The conquest of Sindh would not only enhance the glory of the caliphate, but also elevate his own stature in the court to the skies. Another important point was that shortly before Muhammad bin Qasim's invasion, Hajjaj had sent an expedition to Sindh under the command of Budhail bin Tahfa, which had failed miserably, and Budhail was killed by Raja Dahir's army. Hajjaj was also eager to avenge this defeat and the death of his commander. Some sources also suggest that he had promised the caliph that he would deposit double the amount of all expenses incurred on the Sindh campaign into the royal treasury from the spoils of war after the victory. In other words, it was a political and economic investment for him.
Another political reason was that some rebellious Arab chiefs of the Umayyad government who were involved in revolts in Iraq had fled to Sindh, and Raja Dahir had given them political asylum. Hajjaj was also demanding the return of these rebels, and Dahir's refusal added fuel to the fire.
It is also important to understand that Muhammad bin Qasim's attack was by no means the first Arab invasion of Sindh. Before this, since the era of the Rashidun Caliphate, that is from the mid-7th century, at least 14 or 15 small and large military expeditions had been sent to Sindh and the coastal areas of India. However, all these efforts either failed or were limited to looting in the coastal areas. These failures had taught Hajjaj that to conquer Sindh, a very organized, large-scale and technologically advanced attack was necessary.
That is why he chose his nephew and son-in-law, the 17-year-old Imaduddin Muhammad bin Qasim, to lead this campaign. Although young, Muhammad bin Qasim was not inexperienced. He had previously led a successful campaign against the Kurds in the Fars region of Persia and also served as the governor of Shiraz. His youth was perhaps an advantage for Hajjaj, as he would follow every order verbatim and would not deviate one bit from Hajjaj's instructions. This relationship also ensured his loyalty.
The preparation for this campaign was completely different from all previous campaigns and was unparalleled. About 6,000 of Syria's finest cavalry soldiers, considered the most elite and combat-ready unit of the Umayyad army, were part of this force. In addition, there were about 3,000 camel-mounted soldiers and a long caravan of thousands of camels to transport supplies, weapons, and other equipment. But the deadliest weapon of this army was the fortress-breaking machines called manjonik. 5 large mangonels were sent, which were the heavy artillery of that era. These were actually counterweight trebuchets, which worked on the principles of mechanical physics. A heavy weight weighing several tons was placed on one end of a large arm, and the stone to be thrown was on the other. When the weight was released, it would fall very rapidly, and the other end of the arm would swing and hurl the stone with incredible speed and force towards the castle walls. One of these gigantic mangonels was named Arus, meaning the bride, and it is said that 500 trained men were required to operate it.
Hajjaj bin Yusuf himself was sitting in Basra, but he had established a communication system that is astonishing even today. There was a system of fast-moving couriers who would change to fresh horses every few miles, delivering moment-by-moment news of Muhammad bin Qasim's campaign and Hajjaj's orders. The letters were preserved in such a way that they would not be damaged by rain or moisture. This system was so effective that Hajjaj was not only giving instructions on war strategy, but was also dictating how to treat prisoners, what treaties to make with the local people, and even how to supply vinegar to the soldiers.
Muhammad bin Qasim advanced from Iraq through Persia, then through Makran, which is modern-day Balochistan. The governor of Makran, Muhammad bin Harun, assisted him and also sent a contingent of his army with him. From there, he moved along the coast and in early 712 CE, reached and besieged the famous port of Debal in Sindh. This was the same place where the incident with the sea pirates had occurred. Debal at that time was an important commercial center of Sindh and a strongly fortified city. During the siege, the biggest obstacle for the Arab army was a very tall temple in the center of the city, on whose dome a large red flag was flying. The local people held a superstitious belief that as long as this flag was intact, no one could conquer the city. This flag had become a symbol of their courage and the city's invincibility. Here, the Chachnama, which is the most important historical source for this entire campaign, mentions an interesting incident. It is said that during the siege, someone from within the city revealed the secret to the Arabs that if they could somehow bring down the temple's flag, the morale of the city's people would be broken. Upon hearing this, Muhammad bin Qasim turned his largest mangonel, a rus, towards the flag and gave the order to expert marksmen. A heavy stone struck the flagpole with full force, and the red flag fell to the ground. The fall of the flag caused fear and panic to spread throughout the city. The people's morale was shattered, the defense weakened, and the Arab army launched a decisive attack and captured the city. Historians disagree on what happened after the conquest of Debal. Some sources, particularly the Chachnama, state that because the city had offered stiff resistance, a massacre continued for 3 days after the victory, and many people were killed. The temple was also damaged. But when Hajjaj learned the details, strict instructions came from him that in the future, cities that surrendered should have their places of worship given protection and not be destroyed. The prisoners whose capture had been the pretext for this war were also freed from Debil.
After Debal, Muhammad bin Qasim advanced towards Needham Court near present-day Hyderabad, Sindh. The majority of the population there consisted of followers of Buddhism who were already unhappy with the Brahmin rule. They opened the city gates without a fight and welcomed the Arab army. The city was taken peacefully here. After Needham, the next target was Sehwan, also known as Sibistan. It was ruled by Majara, the Raja Dahir's cousin. He offered some resistance but was soon defeated and fled the city, and Sehwan was also conquered.
By now, a large part of the western bank of the Indus River was under Arab control. Throughout this period, Raja Dahir was present with his main army on the eastern bank of the Indus. He perhaps did not consider the situation as serious as it was. He made no effective effort to stop the Arab army from crossing the river. Muhammad bin Qasim, with the help of local boatmen and sailors, built a bridge of boats and successfully transferred his entire army and equipment to the eastern bank of the river. This was a brilliant military strategy.
Finally, on June 20th, 712 CE, the two armies faced each other on the battlefield of Rawar on the bank of the Indus River. This was one of the most decisive battles in the history of Sindh. The battle was extremely fierce. Raja Dahir himself was leading the army. He was seated in a beautiful howdah on a magnificent white elephant. Intense fighting continued throughout the day. At one point, the Sindhi army seemed to have the upper hand. Then Muhammad bin Qasim made a decisive move.
Arab archers shot arrows dipped in naphtha towards Raja Dahir's elephant. Naphtha was a type of crude petroleum, a flammable substance that would catch fire and could not be extinguished even with water. It was a terrifying chemical weapon of that era. As soon as the flaming arrows hit, the elephant went into a frenzy. Its howdah caught fire and it trumpeted and ran from the battlefield towards the river. When the elephant entered the river, the fire was extinguished, but in the chaos, Raja Dahir was separated from his army and came close to the enemy's grasp. At that moment, an arrow struck him in the chest, and wounded, he dismounted from the elephant. He began to fight on foot with his sword, but could not resist for long, and finally an Arab soldier beheaded him with a sword strike. As soon as the Sindhi army saw that their king was killed, their morale completely broke. A stampede broke out in the army, and they fled the battlefield. The battle had been decided. After the victory, Muhammad bin Qasim had Raja Dahir's head cut off and sent to Hajjaj bin Yusuf.
Raja Dahir's character is also controversial in history. On one hand, he is called a brave ruler who died defending his land. On the other hand, books like the Chachnama level some serious accusations against him. For example, that he formally married his own sister based on an astrologer's prediction to keep power within his family. This was against the Hindu customs of the time, and his brother had also strongly opposed it.
His father, Chach, who was himself a Brahmin and had seized power from the Buddhist kings of Sindh, had imposed very strict social restrictions on the so-called lower castes, especially the Jats and Lohanas. They were not allowed to carry swords, wear silk clothes, or use saddles on their horses. Due to these restrictions, a large part of the population was resentful of the royal family. But the other side of the picture is that Dahir gave refuge to Arab rebels opposed to the Umayyad government, which can be seen as his bravery, and people of different religions lived peacefully in his kingdom. Therefore, calling him just a villain or a hero would probably be an injustice.
After Dahir's death, his widow Rani Bai took refuge in the fort of Rawar and continued to resist for some time. But when she became convinced that defeat was certain, she performed the ancient Rajput ritual of Jauhar to avoid the humiliation of capture and set herself on fire along with the other women of the fort. Dahir's son Jai Singh escaped the battle and went to Brahmanabad, another major city in Sindh. Muhammad bin Qasim turned towards Brahmanabad, where a harsh siege lasted for 6 months.
Finally, some people from within the city, possibly including one of Jai Singh's ministers, colluded with the Arabs and opened the city gates. After that, Muhammad bin Qasim advanced northwards towards Multan, the ancient and wealthiest city of Upper Sindh and southern Punjab. Multan was called the City of Gold due to its wealth. There was also fierce fighting there, but then the Arabs somehow found out about the canal that supplied water to the city. They blocked the course of this canal, the water in the city ran out, and the defenders were forced to surrender.
From the famous Sun Temple of Multan, the Arabs obtained an immense amount of gold, silver, and jewels as spoils of war. Here the question arises, why did the local people like the Buddhists of Nirunkot or the traitors of Brahminabad side with the invaders? There were several reasons for this. First, old political rivalries and resentment against the Brahmin monarchy. Second, the social restrictions imposed on Jats and other lower castes who hoped that their situation would improve with the arrival of new rulers.
Third, some landlords and merchants took this step simply to save their lives and property and to secure their future by aligning with the new rulers in the changing situation. What was the end of Muhammad bin Qasim, the man who achieved such great victories? There are two completely different traditions about this. The first, which is more dramatic and unrealistic, is found in the Chachnama. According to it, Raja Dahir's two daughters, Surya Devi and Parimal Devi, were taken as prisoners to the Caliph Walid ibn Abd al-Malik in Damascus.
When they were presented before the Caliph, they accused Muhammad bin Qasim of having violated their honor before sending them to the Caliph. The Caliph, upon hearing this, became furiously angry and immediately ordered that Muhammad bin Qasim be sewn into raw cowhide and presented before him. This barbaric order was carried out, and on the way, Muhammad bin Qasim died of suffocation and torture. When his body reached Damascus, the girls allegedly confessed that they had lied to avenge the destruction of their father and homeland.
This story seems to be nothing more than a legend and is completely rejected by modern historians. It is unbelievable that a sensible caliph would inflict such a horrific punishment on his most successful and loyal general based on the word of two captive girls without any investigation. The second tradition, which most serious historians consider closer to the truth, is not so dramatic but purely political. What happened was that in 714 CE, Hajjaj bin Yusuf passed away. The very next year, in 715 CE, Caliph Walid ibn Abd al-Malik also died.
The new caliph was Walid's brother, Sulayman ibn Abdul Malik, who was a staunch political opponent of Hajjaj bin Yusuf. There was intense rivalry between them. As soon as Sulayman became caliph, he began taking action against all the important officials of Hajjaj's era, especially his relatives. Since Muhammad bin Qasim was Hajjaj's nephew and son-in-law, he was also immediately dismissed from the governorship of Sindh. He was recalled to Iraq and thrown into the prison of Wasit city, where he died a short time later due to torture. His end was not the result of a girl's revenge, but a consequence of the brutal political struggles of the Umayyad court and a change in power. After Muhammad bin Qasim's return and death, the Arab hold on Sindh weakened. The Umayyad Caliphate itself fell victim to internal civil wars. Taking advantage of this, Rajput states, especially rulers like Raja Nagabhata I of the Gujara Pratihara dynasty and Bappa Rawal of Mewar, successfully prevented the Arabs from advancing further from Sindh towards northern and central India. For about 150 years, the Arab advance remained confined to Sindh. The long-term effects of this invasion were very profound. The biggest impact, obviously, was the formal entry and establishment of Islam as a political and military force in the subcontinent. This laid the foundation for the future invasions of Mahmud Ghaznavi and Muhammad Ghori and the establishment of Muslim empires. The second important impact was on a cultural and intellectual level. Through this contact, the Arabs were introduced to the ancient sciences and arts of India. They learned numerals in mathematics from here, which the world today mistakenly calls Arabic numerals. They were in fact an Indian invention. Similarly, the concept of zero also reached the West from here through the Arabs. Many Sanskrit books on medicine, astronomy and philosophy were translated into Arabic in Baghdad, and this knowledge reached Europe, which helped lay the foundation for the Renaissance there. In the modern era, the personality of Muhammad bin Qasim and this invasion are viewed from very different perspectives. In Pakistan's official narrative, he is considered a great Islamic hero, even the first Pakistani, and the theory is presented that the foundation of Pakistan was laid not in 1947, but in 712. This narrative has been promoted through textbooks and popular literature.
On the other hand, especially Sindhi nationalists and many neutral historians consider him an invader and an occupier, and they declare Raja Dahir a hero who defended his homeland. Their position is that presenting invaders as heroes and local defenders as villains is a distortion of history.
The truth is that characters in history are often not entirely black or white. While Muhammad bin Qasim acted harshly in Dabal, he also granted amnesty to cities like Nerun Court and, on Hajjaj's instructions, provided protection to the places of worship of Hindus and Buddhists in the conquered territories by giving them the status of dhimmi, similar to the people of the book.
In Brahmanabad, old Hindu officers were also reinstated in the administration, which shows that the objective was not just religious conversion, but also to establish a functional government and obtain economic benefits. In summary, Muhammad bin Qasim's invasion of Sindh is an event in history with countless dimensions. It teaches us that to understand history, one should not be content with a single story, but should examine different sources and view events in the context of their own time. The determination of heroes and villains often depends on who is telling the story, when, and for what purpose. Understanding these complex events of the past with impartiality is extremely important for us today to understand our own identity and our present.